Good morning, Job Snatchers. Welcome to episode 5 of the Job-Snatch-Her Series. And I am so excited to talk with Jasmine Neveles. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and then we'll get straight to it because I'm too excited.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jazz. I'm super excited to be here with you to kind of share my journey from corporate to founder of a CPG brand. I've spent the last 15 years of my career in marketing and am excited to chat with you all today. So, thank you.
Yes. Oh, such a good transition. What inspired you to start Uncharted Coffee, especially doing 15 years in corporate?
So, what's really interesting? My sister and I, who's my co-founder, we decided to start Uncharted because of our mom. So we were stuck in the house during COVID, really found ourselves becoming disconnected as sisters, and we're really trying to like rebuild that sense of community together. And so in our quest, every week we would visit a local coffee shop and begin to recall just moments of our childhood and how no matter how busy our parents were, they always sat with us at the breakfast table every morning to prepare for the day while having a coffee. And so for us, coffee is all about connection. It's about the connection we have to each other as family, friends, but then connection to people. So we started this brand to really reconnect as people.
That is beautiful. How long have you had Uncharted Coffee?
Just over a year.
Okay.
So, we kind of went from doing a small feasibility study to even understand like would people be interested in our idea to
Mhm.
actually launching the product or starting the like entity formation process in February of last year and then officially launched our direct to consumer offering in November. So, we're a relatively new brand, but we've gotten a lot of great traction and we're hoping to, continue the momentum.
I love that. How do you envision Uncharted Coffee making a difference in the coffee industry?
So, one thing that was really important to us when we started this brand was to kind of like ignite a fire, to create a social movement around the coffee space from a supply chain perspective. And so, what we're hoping to do is to create conversation to really challenge people to think about from a sourcing perspective, where does their coffee come from, and force some accountability on the big players, the ones in the green cups. Let's just say that. But I think about this. Like similar to beauty, right? Or like fast fashion, right? Like everybody, when the secret came out that Zara was, essentially manufacturing their clothing in sweatshops and not paying people fairly, people like were in revolt and they were like, you guys need better working conditions. And so I'm hoping that we can do something similar, but for the coffee industry.
Oh, yes, that's so exciting. That is so exciting. I love coffee. I tell everybody I'm a coffee connoisseur, but it's not true. I drink the coffee in my house and I love going to different coffee shops. So let me know what makes your coffee, like what sets Uncharted Coffee apart from other brands.
I think the biggest differentiator for us, if I'm being honest, is direct trade. So we source our products from small farms across the globe, and we really try to create that partnership, that lasting relationship. Most of those farms are women owned, and there are not a lot of women in this space. So that's number one. And then I think there are some things that we do that should be just best practices in this industry. Like we use recyclable packaging so that we can minimize our impact on the environment. Our product is traceable on blockchain. So from the moment it leaves the farm all the way to arriving in the US at customs to your front door as a customer. So we kind of trace our product from origin all the way to your kitchen table, which is another benefit. And then I think the last component is we have a give back program. I think there are some coffee companies that are trying to do this, but
Yeah.
essentially we partner with NGOs and nonprofit organizations to provide educational resources to coffee producing farms across the globe, primarily in South America and Africa.
Wow. That is that's that's insane. That's amazing. That is freaking amazing. So here's my
It's a
other
lot.
question. It's a lot, and it's just you and your sister, or do you guys have a strong team? Like you guys are a strong team, apparently, right? Like the force
It's
in
just
between you
us.
two. How do you do it? How do you make time? As an entrepreneur, I'm like, there's little to minimum time, and I always tell people like Shaka Khan and Whitney said, I'm every woman. So to split such a big venture between the two of you, how do you guys balance work life?
Um, I'm not going to say I have the perfect answer, but I can tell you what has been working for us so far. So I think it's tough being in business with your like family member, someone
Yeah.
intimately you're close with. And so we carve out time to still be sisters, but then time to be business partners. And this idea of like carving out time is how we've been able to kind of tackle both. So we time block. So every Monday, I'm like, I'm going to focus on business development from 9 a.m. to noon. And so I do some things like that, or like I'm going to work on social media for 4 hours every Saturday or something like that.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I think the hardest thing is being disciplined to those moments of time that you like block things off. It's really easy to just like multitask and do something else. But for me, looking ahead, so every Friday at the end of the day, I kind of make a to do list of like what I hope to accomplish in the following week. And then I kind of block my calendar so I have time to do those things. And I try to hold myself accountable to that. It doesn't always happen, but that's what we try to do.
Time blocking is so essential, especially for entrepreneurs who do so many different things. As when you do every aspect of your business, you have no choice but to time block. So I'm so happy that you brought that up, especially for entrepreneurs out there who sometimes struggle with it. It's not an easy task. It's not an easy thing to do to be a business owner and an entrepreneur. So it's kind of nice and dope to have your sister there that you guys can really have honest conversations. If you can't have an honest conversation with your sister, you can't have a honest conversation with anybody. I always
It's
laugh
true.
with people. My sister, I have hired her unintentionally, and she's my image consultant. So when things don't look right, she's like, "Hey, you want to change that up a little bit?" I'm like, "Dang, other people like it, but it's your sister who really gives you the honest feedback." So that's dope to me. Just
Oh, I'm
kind of
so excited you get feedback from your sister. That's so cool. We love our sisters.
yes,
Siblings are the
we
best.
do. If you don't have a sister, I feel bad for you because they're so essential.
Hmm.
They're so
They
important,
are
and they tell you the
so
hard things that
important.
you're like, I didn't really want to hear it, but I'll take it and I'll use it.
Hmm.
The feedback is crucial, but geez.
That's true.
There is a part that I really liked on your website saying revolutionizing mornings. What does that mean? What is the idea behind that?
So, to take a step back, when we started this company, we really wanted it to be a social movement to really recognize like the past, the history of coffee, some
Mhm.
of the injustice that's happened there, and then use that as kind of a springboard to do better in the future. And so, this idea of revolutionizing your morning is to drive some social accountability and self awareness and knowledge around what role we all play. Um, in the exploitation that's happened in the coffee industry and what
Yep.
we can do better as conscious consumers to revolutionize and change that. And so, what we mean by that is ask the thoughtful questions. If you're not buying coffee from us, fine. Wherever you're buying it from, ask where did it come from? How is it produced? What are the working conditions on that farm? Are people paid a fair wage? Those kind of things is what we mean by revolutionize your morning. We want you to be intentional about the products that you purchase.
I love that. How do you guys source like where you find these beans and the women? And what does that look like for you? What's the process?
So it's not perfect. So I think part of this conversation is like entrepreneurship is a learning.
Yes.
And so the first few farms that we found just traveling as sisters, and we went to go visit local coffee farms and just built that relationship with people over time. So that's one, like we actually get the opportunity to go there. There are some specific regions that produce really interesting and dynamic coffee that we want Americans to experience. So Americans are creatures of habit. We typically only consume coffee from South America. And there's great coffee in South America, but there's like so much more to see. There's over 70 countries that produce coffee, and we want people to explore and expand their palate. So, places like in the Middle East, like Yemen, phenomenal place for coffee, but it's really hard to get out of the country because of the civil unrest that's currently happening. So in those type of instances where we have something that's maybe in a conflict zone like Congo, we work with an importer who has those relationships, boots on the ground, who will put us on like a Zoom call to like interview, validate that this coffee farm meets our sourcing criteria, and then we'll go from there.
Wow. That's awesome. How do you balance the desire of innovation with the comfort of familiar morning routines in your coffee offerings?
So this one is tough. I'm going to tell you my own personal experience. So I love to innovate. There's like so many amazing new ways to produce, enjoy coffee at home, how to prepare it, how to brew it. But we're creatures of habit, and so like during the week, I'm busy. So Monday through Friday, I have a semi-automatic espresso machine. And just like clockwork, I have digital settings and I make a flat white with cashew milk every morning. It takes me like 2 minutes in total to like make the thing, clean the machine, enjoy the coffee. But on the weekend, that's when I like to innovate and try something new. So on the weekend, I'm like, pulling up recipes from Google or like looking for inspiration. I went to Trader Joe's last week and got fresh lavender. Like I made a
Mhm.
lavender syrup, put it inside my coffee. Then I used the pour over method to like slowly brew my coffee over time. And then I made a lavender latte, right? So I had a little bit more time. All of that to say, like, I like to try new brewing methods. I like to try locally produced, locally sourced ingredients like fresh lavender, and just try to challenge myself to make something different. And I try to document that, right, so that people can
Mhm.
also do the same thing. One thing that's really important to us at a core of our business that we recognize is like people associate coffee with convenience and this idea of like rushing. But
Yep.
if you go to other parts of the world, like Italy, for example, people don't rush and consume their coffee. You sit down, you enjoy a coffee. So we're trying to remind people that we understand life is busy, life is chaotic, but don't forget the importance of slowing down to take care of yourself and do it with the coffee, right? It's more of a meditative moment, a moment to be mindful and intentional. And that's something that I do every weekend.
That is such a good way to put it because I know when I make coffee, I'm like, okay, I gotta go. I have to make this. I have to hurry up and make a coffee. Hopefully, it comes out right. If not, I'm still gonna drink it. So putting forth the
Because you're
idea,
busy.
putting forth the idea that it
Hmm.
is for a mindful moment, that it should be enjoyed and not rushed. I feel like that's just us here. It's wild because we're always in a rush.
Yeah.
For the women that want to join the coffee industry, what are some tips that you can give us to start? What should we do first? Like, where should the research start? How should we get our wheels turning?
So I'm going to give you like the honest truth, not like the
Mhm.
politically correct, because I think that's what
Please.
women need. I think if you want to start, first recognize that there are not a lot of women in the coffee space, period.
Okay.
So, and that's at all levels of supply chain. So you're going to be the minority. And with that comes some like lack of confidence and credibility. So, one thing that I learned coffee is classified as a consumer packaged good, CPG. And CPG brands are very hard to fund, right? From a external capital perspective. And women-owned businesses receive like less than 2% of all VC capital funds in the country.
Mhm.
And then minority women, even less than that. And so I will say to women starting out, like, where do you start? First, what problem are you solving for your customers? Why should they care? And then once you have that like idea, just quickly do a feasibility study. Like throw some product in market. Don't spend a lot of money on packaging, on like design, all of that stuff. Forget it. Just get something in market to validate your idea. And then once you validate that idea, I think it's super important to really figure out your operations and logistics. That's the one thing I will say I think we did right at first. Like people were rushing us to just like go to market, just launch, figure it out later. We were like, no, you have to figure out your supply chain. You have to understand who are all the key players that are going to be involved, what's your role, what's their role, and really developing like an SOP or a ways of working that people clearly understand those like defined roles, and you can build out what's the timeline to get my product, how long does it take for me to get it to a grocery store or a retailer. Like you really need to get good at your operations first, and then you can build a customer experience around that.
That's a good idea. That's a good part because I think a lot of us forget like all the steps. It's just let's launch, let's go, and then we'll figure it out. But you can kick yourself in the butt doing that. I'm glad that you brought up SOPs. A lot of companies don't have SOPs. We rush.
Yeah.
And then when we try to get help and outsource, we don't have a system of operations. We don't have these things that we can share with the people that we're pitching to. Did
It's
you
true.
guys pitch to investors? Like, or do you have investors? Like, what does this look like for you? Are you bootstrapping?
So we are primarily bootstrapping. We had one investor come in like early on about a year ago, and it really helped support us with our initial production run of packaging. So very grateful for that. But it's not enough to sustain like the business on a day-to-day basis. So we bootstrap. We are currently fundraising. And how to do that, I think this is the one thing people don't tell you as a woman, especially as a minority woman, like what the secret sauce is to get funded. And I didn't know this a year ago. This is something that I'm just learning, connecting with other founders and having a diverse group of founders that will be honest with you. So that
Okay.
means men, women of all backgrounds, of all industries. And what a lot of capitalist companies are looking for, capitalist funds, are they're looking for people who are have successfully exited a company already, which means you started a company and you were acquired
Okay.
or purchased, right? So that's like if you had, they call it, like if you're a serial entrepreneur, like that's what they look for. Like you clearly know how to build businesses and successfully get them acquired or sold. So that's number one. The second thing they look at is your pedigree. Have you come from a big consulting firm, for example, like McKinsey or Boston Consulting? Did you go to Harvard or Yale? So they're kind of looking at your background and your credentials. And then the next component that they're really looking at, two others, who's on your advisory team. So you can have paid or unpaid advisors. Don't let people tell you that you always have to have a paid set of advisors. You don't. But like, what is their pedigree? Where do they come from? Have they successfully launched other businesses? And then the last component of that is traction and revenue. Like, what can you show that you've delivered? So if you don't, and every fund is different,
Okay.
they're kind of looking at these like 4 to 5 criteria. And most of them, like if you don't meet like 3 out of the 5, like the magic number is like not disclosed, of course, because they don't want to tell you
Right.
that. But if you don't meet a majority of these requirements that they're looking for, they consider you like high risk. And so you have to help them feel more comfortable to demystify the risk. And the best way to usually do that is with traction and revenue. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, this is where we get very uncomfortable because you don't have a lot of money, you don't have all the answers, and you're trying to build your business to show that to earn trust, and you don't know how to best do that. And so I would challenge people to say like traction and revenue doesn't always have to be revenue. Like traction can say you have a that you want to waitlist people for to build
Okay.
excitement and momentum. And so you have created a successful waitlist that then turns into your email database, which is free marketing that you can use later to acquire customers. So even if you show, for example, in 3 months, I was able to build my waiting list to 1,000 people or 10,000. Like, get some other industry benchmarks to show that you've kind of met the benchmark or exceeded in some way. And that's great
Okay.
traction. So, for us, we were able to participate in an incubator, an accelerator, I should say, about co op principles through a company called Start Co op. And one thing that was really impressive to them is how we were able to create community and build our following on Instagram. And we did it all organically just by trying to provide educational tools, resources, showcasing a little bit about who we are, which is still uncomfortable for both of us. And people latched on to that messaging. They were like, we see you're building it. We kind of know what you're trying to accomplish, and we're in this with you. And that was traction and revenue. So I just challenge people to think about that. Don't always worry about the sales revenue. There's other
Right.
ways that you can show your progress.
That is such a good point because then we do get not anxious, but we get hesitant because, okay, I haven't raised $100 million. I've never touched $40 million. How am I going to be successful in getting founders and or investors? So that's a really good point. Showing traction in other ways is so helpful. And then
Hmm.
you mentioned something that I really want to touch on too, being uncomfortable, basically just showing up on social media, making sure that you are allowing people into your life, into your space, into what you're doing. How do you guys work through that? Because I think all of us go through that because I don't want you in my business, but I have to show you.
Same.
So, what do you guys do to kind of alleviate that uncomfortable feeling?
So I think a couple of things that I've learned there's a little bit of a like double standard here because if you are, it's not always the case, but if you're a male founded consumer brand, you can get away with being behind the scenes and your brand
Right.
can do really well. Like people don't expect you to like be the face of the brand. But if you're a female founded brand, people expect you to be the face of the brand and they want to see you and they want you out there, which comes with like all the things that we worry about. Does our hair look okay? Are we saying the right things? Are people going to judge me? I don't want my kids on camera. Like all of these things. And I don't know why it's that way. But to answer your question, how we get around that is one, I mean, we're like a little over a year into this. And I think we've just recently, within this year, accepted the fact that like we have to show who we are more on
Yes.
social media on camera and we've created like very clear like guardrails around how much we're willing to share. So we both don't have children, but if we did, I wouldn't share anything about my children. You might know I have a daughter, a son, but you would never like see them. So really aligning on like what are the like, you know, what's the framework or what are the like go no go things that we're willing to do and share. I think it's really important being authentic and true to ourselves, which was something else that we struggled with. Like we didn't want to come across as being like too much of like a feminist brand or too socially provocative, but the reality is that's who we are. And I think it takes a lot, and I hear this a lot from some of the founders that I've met that are like Indian because they, you know, some of them maybe they have an accent or they're immigrants, and so they also feel some like intimidation with showing up in a social media setting. But the reality is we're all so different and there are so many people like us that need to see people like us. So that's how we have like gotten past this intimidation that we have of trying to be perfect. Is like social media isn't perfect. They want you to think it is, but it's not. And just trying to be authentic to who we are, and when we make mistakes or we do something wrong, acknowledge that and use that as a way to hopefully inspire other women and help them feel more comfortable to say like, look, these are the mistakes I made. It's okay if
Yes.
you make them too. It's okay to learn from my mistakes. Like, let's stop trying to put each other down and just like acknowledge what it is and keep going.
Right. And stop trying to be perfect. I should be able to show up with a sleepy eye and still give you content and context because it is valuable. Like,
You know what's so interesting to that point? I'm going to actually give you something that you might like really find interesting. So we had a funeral in our family about a month ago,
I'm sorry to
and
hear
we had
that.
planned for this funeral. Thank you. But it was planned, you know, you're going to be there. You think you're emotionally ready, but sometimes it weighs a toll on you. And so, long story short, I had a friend, a producer, who invited me to be on a live TV segment to introduce the coffee company during Black History Month. The I mean, an opportunity of a lifetime, right? To like talk about your brand during a month that really highlights creatives and, you know, inventors in the Black community. So I was so honored. And it just so happens to be that the day they asked us to go on this live TV segment was the day after the funeral. And when they asked us, you know, I was like, yeah, of course, like I can do it. I should be okay. I'm emotionally prepared. I've made my peace. We've transitioned. But I was so, the day of the funeral was much more emotional than what I expected, and we had to start early the next day for the live segment. And so we did the live segment. It was really well received, but I didn't feel my best because I was tired. I didn't sleep well. I was really nervous. Just all of these emotions going from something so sad to something like really exciting. And all of that to say, I don't feel like I was perfect that day in my appearance, but the delivery of the segment was well received. And so, again, I just showed up. I was like, I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to be who I am. And this is what it is. This is reality. You may have something sad or traumatic that you have to deal with, and you just have to find the courage to overcome.
Absolutely. The importance of showing up and showing out, even when we don't feel like it. I don't think that we give ourselves enough credit. Like, okay, bet I'm going to go and I'm going to have this conversation. I'm not ready. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do that. I can definitely, I feel you on that. I feel you. I have moments where I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about today. It's just not, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't,
And that's normal.
it is. It's normal.
It's so normal.
We're human. We're going to
Yeah,
do this and we're
we
going
are.
to continue to push brands and showing up. So I'm so happy that you brought that up. With even with that, like how do you hype yourself up for conversations like this, for being in media all the time and having a camera in your face and with everything that you do? How do you hype yourself up? Do you have a favorite song? What do you do?
I always channel my inner Sasha Fierce, like Beyonce
Okay.
always finds a way through. I think that's one. I believe in the power of prayer. So anytime I know that I need to be on, I pray the day before. And I always meditate. Before I have to do anything, I take a moment, I take a deep breath, I collect my thoughts. I try to dedicate some time to at least think about what I want to say or have bullet points so I'm not like scatterbrained and all over the place. Um, but I take a collective moment for myself and I'm just like, you can do this. There are so many other women who have paved the way. And you kind of owe it to them to show up. And so that's just what I do.
I love it, especially starting off as Sasha Fierce. You can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong. I love
Can't
that
go wrong.
at all. Every time I start something, I listen to I'm Every Woman. That is my go to. When people get in my car, they're like, okay, you're getting ready to go do something because I know once you put this song on, it's something that you're getting ready to do. So having a routine is super important. Making sure that we have a self care routine. What's your self care routine? Because you are
Hmm.
busy, you do a lot. What does self care look like to you?
So a couple things. So every morning I wake up like earlier than everyone else in my house so that I can have some quiet time to read, to have a coffee, to meditate and to stretch. So I do that like every morning. And then I try to work out every day. I think that I've seen so many founders, do damage to their bodies because they're not sleeping. They typically start consuming more alcohol because they're stressed, and they eat poorly because they don't have time. So, one thing that's really important to me in terms of self care is like uh, physically taking care of my body. So, proper nutrition, proper exercise, sleep. I'm not the best at, to be honest. I could get better at that, but
Let's say
those
I
are the
don't think
things I
any of
do
us
to like
are.
really, yeah, I'm trying to get better at sleep. But those are the things that I do for self-care. And then like travel is really important to me. I mean, no surprise. Like
Right.
that's part of like the genesis of this brand. But I'm a firm believer of like weekend resets. Even if you don't go anywhere, but just like get in the car and have a road trip, I think there's something to be said for like leaving your neighborhood, leaving your house, and going somewhere where people can't easily assess you, and where you because if I'm at home on the weekend, like I'm gonna run errands, I'm gonna go to the grocery store, I'm gonna
Right.
find things to fill my time. But when I'm in a new space, you can't do that. So it kind of like forces you to disconnect a little bit. So I try to like every quarter do something to get away.
Oh, nice. Where's your favorite place that you guys have traveled to and had the best coffee? I know you mentioned Yemen earlier. Yemen,
Mm.
excuse me. But where else have you gone that you're like, okay, these coffee beans are amazing. The people are beautiful. I'm coming back.
So, what's really funny is a place that really surprised me. Two places that surprised me. One was Peru, really surprised me. I never thought of Peru for coffee, and it was really just like bold, nutty, chocolatey. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Never thought of Peru for
Right.
coffee. The second one that I knew produced coffee, but I had again like a negative connotation in my mind was Mexico. Like I just
Mm,
assumed like it's so close. How good could it be? Or like,
right.
and I love Mexican food. I love Mexican culture, but I was just like, it's so close. Like, how could they be making such good coffee? And then I actually got to spend some time in the coffee producing regions in Mexico. I got to spend some time in Oaxaca. I got to go to Chiapas,
Mm,
spent some time visiting various coffee shops in Mexico City, and it blew my mind. Like, and I think this is a good point, which is a segue, which is a lot of the coffee that I think comes into the US is such like poor quality commercial grade coffee that we don't know that there's better out there. Like I had coffee from Mexico before, but it wasn't great. And I'm assuming it was just like poor quality, mass
right.
produced, probably heavily treated with chemicals. But then you have like single origin from a regenerative farm where it's small, somebody is working that land for generations, it's been in their family, and it's like night and day. And
Right.
so for me, I think every time I go into these coffee regions, I'm just blown away by the amount of like care that people have and pride that they take in like producing this little coffee bean that we take for granted.
Absolutely. Can you share some insights into like the challenges and rewards of maintaining a sustainable business in the coffee industry? I know we talked about having finding the right coffee and making sure it tastes well, all of that good stuff. But what does that look like in your business model?
So I think the biggest challenge for us, two things, I think is internal headcount, like resource. You know, you kind of alluded to this earlier, like, you know, we're a small team and you just there's so much work to do and how do you get it done? So that's one,
Yeah.
just like bandwidth. I think the second biggest challenge for us, and I think anyone who works in coffee, is climate change. And the reason being, I don't think we talk about this enough, but people in other, you know, like we still talk about climate change like it's coming. But in a lot of these coffee producing countries, it's already arrived. And so you look at places like Brazil, where they have, you know, dozens of days, a month at a time, where they have like it's so hot that everything is drying up and dying. So you have these extreme droughts happening right now in Brazil and in parts of Eastern Africa, for example. And so you can't, there's not enough water to nourish the land. People have to prioritize water for consumption and survival. They can't water their crops. And so you see a lot of like volatility right now in the coffee industry from a pricing perspective. And depending on where you are, the quality as well. Because if you can't properly nurture the plant, you know, you're going to eventually compromise the quality. So, all of that to say, we had a coffee we had planned. So, we do what's called demand planning. And so,
Okay.
demand planning essentially is like a forward looking exercise of predicting how much product you'll need by when. And the reason we do that is we source from different origins all over. You know, some places we have relationships, some we need to go build relationships. And so we've identified a calendar for 12 months of 12 different regions we want to source coffee from. Well, January of this year, the first region we wanted to source coffee from was Uganda. We thought it was interesting, it was different, and we received a sample from a farmer and the quality had been compromised. I don't know what happened to the quality of the bean, but something happened in the growing process that it didn't yield us a product we felt proud of. And so we
Okay.
had to pivot and go to another origin. So I say all that because it's a very currently because of what's happening globally within climate, flooding, droughts, it's very volatile. So you just have to be able to be a little bit agile. You always need to have a backup plan. And that's just something that we've learned.
Absolutely. So, for those of us who want to support Uncharted Coffee, how can we support you? What do we need to do? Where do we find you? Give us all the good details.
So I'm going to make a weird ask that I think people probably
Okay.
normally don't ask. If you want to support and you
Yep.
have extra time and a skill set and you want to volunteer and come support us build this brand, I will take that. Even if it's like 5 hours a week, I could do graphic design. I'll take it. I'll take any support we can get. So that's one.
Okay.
Second is, sign up for our emails and follow us on social media. We are drinkuncharted.com, but that's also our handle across all of our social media accounts. So Instagram, TikTok, follow us on social.
Okay. And you guys have, oops, a great brand. I was trying to share it, but if anything, I'll make sure to put it in the comments under the video. And I really, really, really love the ask of support. That's the only thing we can do. If you guys can support, make sure you let Jasmine know what type of support you're offering, how many hours. Be very descriptive. Don't just say, hey,
Yep,
I want to help. That's great and all, but tell me what you can do. Tell me how you plan to help and what, result you're looking to create for their brand.
that
I
would be
always,
awesome.
heck yeah, I love that. I just did a post like that earlier in the quarter. Like, I just need support. I can't pay you. I'll be very honest. But once this sucker is going, then we'll go from there. But I always ask guests, what is your career affirmation that you utilize in your business? Like, what is the affirmation that gets you going in the morning, in the evening, that you have written on a sticky note somewhere that keeps you encouraged and empowered?
Um, Oh, this is a tricky one. Okay, so I was actually having this conversation yesterday with my partner. Previously in my corporate life, I would set annual goals that I wanted to achieve, like professional goals, every like 1, 3, and 5 years. And every few months, I would reflect and look at those goals. And I successfully always accomplished my goals in a corporate setting. And it gave me a little bit of confidence. Number one, that I'm like, strong woman, I can do this. But it gave me this confidence that like I can accomplish anything if I put it on paper and I make the time to like do it. And so every day that I wake up, that's just what I feel like. I'm like, you've accomplished so much already. You can do this. Like it's not if, it's just like when. When can you get to a point where you feel, the business is profitable? When can you get to a point where you hire a replacement CEO and just advise? Like, but I feel like because I've been successful in my past, that I need to take all of the learnings from that previous life and just bring them forward. And I think it's hard to do by yourself, but I think I can do it. I just wake up every day and I'm like, you could do this. There are people who have done it. And more importantly, I look at myself as being the example or inspiration for someone else. Like if I fail, great, fine, whatever, like I'm okay with it. But I feel like the likelihood of me failing is very low because I have a great support system and I work hard. So I think, you know, time will tell, but I just feel like I can do it.
I love that. Just straight to it. I can do it. That's half the battle, right? Believing in yourself. Are there any last pieces that you want to share with our audiences about Uncharted Coffee and how we can support, engage? Any last words?
The one thing I will ask this audience is like, what do you need? What would you like to see in your coffee brand? Like, if you could share with us, how can Uncharted be better or different for you? We would love that feedback. Like, we really want to be the best coffee brand, the most sustainable coffee brand in the US. And so, if you have any opportunities for feedback, please share those. We welcome constructive feedback.
Oh, that's beautiful. Jasmine, you are amazing. I appreciate you giving me your time this morning. And I can't wait to see what type of support you get off of this live because LinkedIn, people want to move and groove. So let's see where we can get. And I appreciate you, Job Snatchers. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.
Until next time, thank you.